Just as briefly as you can, in case we get some calls here, who are some running backs that you like that over the next few weeks? And then, like you said, guys, if you listen to this on podcast and you didn't get a chance to pick his brain and you want to check out the website, just go to fantasyomatic, just like it sounds, FANTASYOMATIC. I see Mac Bizzo in the chat room says, thanks, Omatic. Please do the NBA. Nobody cares about NBA. Mac Bizzo, don't make me ban you from this chat room. We talk about two things on this show. Well, three things: TV shows, football, and college basketball. We're not worried about NBA season right now. But who are some of the running backs that you like, Omatic, coming into the playoffs and with the emphasis on this week?
Well, here's some good news. Well, a guy that's going to be an absolute – well, first of all, here's a very quick 10-second drill of the top 5 running back schedules, cumulative schedules for the fantasy playoffs. Arian Foster, great news for those of you that took a chance on him early in your drafts. Then we got DeMarco Murray. And by the way, don't worry about DeMarco Murray dropping about 4 yards per carry off his production in the last few weeks. I personally think that's because they've been missing their fullback, Flametta, who's going to be back actually either this week or next week, so have no fear. And he's got a killer set of matchups with the Giants, Tampa Bay, and Philly. Ridiculous. And then our boy Ray Rice, who could finish the season as the top fantasy back, with matchup against Indy this week, going with San Diego, who just got gashed by MJD, finishing off with Cleveland, and we already saw what he did with Cleveland earlier, just a few weeks back. Another guy, Chris Johnson, he's finally coming on. No surprise, he's hitting the soft spot of his schedule, and he's got a surprisingly soft New Orleans this week, and then followed by Indianapolis, and then Jacksonville after that, who's become very soft against fantasy running backs, about middle of the pack now. So those are your top guys. On the flip side, beware LaShawn Shady McCoy going up against really tough Miami defense that's coming on, also the Jets, and then Dallas. And then after this week, after St. Louis, Marshawn Lynch skittle train is going to be over because he's going to have Chicago and then San Francisco. You don't want to be starting that kid against San Francisco in your championship game. So sorry, Lynch owners, it's been fun, but that ride is over.
Hey, my thing is about Lynch, man, is you get, if you've got stuff out of him at this point, you got to like anything that you've got. And I saw a guy the other day on CBS Sportsline that was just really coming down hard on Darren McFadden, talking about he's the biggest bust of the season and he's absolute trash. I'm like, look, dude, if you didn't draft, that was one of the biggest pieces of advice I gave out before the season was everybody needed to draft Michael Bush. Darren McFadden had a great season last season, but we've all seen this guy get hurt before. And I said that if any owner didn't draft Michael Bush and they had Darren McFadden, they deserve what they get because you knew going in. So I don't really get so mad at a guy like Darren McFadden that got hurt. If anybody's going to be a bust, you talk about a guy like Chris Johnson, who's one of them guys you just keep sticking in there every week and doesn't do anything. You almost would wish he'd get hurt so you could play somebody else because you keep sticking him in there, and he's a liability. I've actually enjoyed, well, I shouldn't say enjoyed, but I've been glad that I've known ahead of time that McFadden's not going to play because I've been able to kind of ride the Bush train and get all those points that he's been putting up for me, although I didn't like his matchup this week against Miami, a tougher run defense than people might have thinking. That one didn't work out too good. But, it's like you said, I've been playing Lynch for 3, 4, 5 weeks straight now, and if that's all I get out of the guy for where you probably drafted him, he's definitely been more pleasant than more, bust.
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, Lynch is a perfect example of a guy who, no one took him before the 5th round, let's say. He was just one of those scrappy, let's take a chance on him guys. He probably saved a lot of teams as far as tough injuries. But I would imagine aside from maybe, getting a double whammy on injuries for some team, if you've made it to the fantasy playoffs and you have him, you most likely have other options as well. There's no way that, you waited till the 5th or 6th round before you started drafting running back. So, again, be happy with what you got. That was definitely a gimme. You'll get one more week out of him, too, by the way. He's going against, St. Louis this week. But then look for other options in Week 15, and especially Week 16 against 49ers.
And I don't have the official numbers. I am a 49ers fan. I should probably research this. I did do a little bit of research for an article a few weeks ago. I believe the fewest rushing touchdowns allowed in a season over the last 10 years is something like 5. San Francisco has yet to allow a rushing touchdown all season, and they've only got 4 games left. So that's pretty stinking impressive that they've gone this long. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know what the odds are that you would have put, or even if Vegas would even put something like that up, that San Francisco doesn't allow a rushing touchdown, or if it's ever been done. But their defense right now, their run defense especially, is playing at a little bit of a historic level, that's for sure.
Lights out. I mean, I'm a Ray Rice owner in a bunch of my leagues, and the San Francisco defense really ruined my Thanksgiving. You take a guy who's as much of a stud as Rice, and he can't even get in the end zone or make more than get more than 5 fantasy points for you, then you know that you got trouble. So don't even take the chance. Try to explore other options for sure for those guys that got to face San Francisco defense in the playoffs.
All right, well, we got a couple questions and lineup questions in the chat room, and I do want to encourage you guys, especially you guys that are listening on download, because we always get so many more downloads than we do live listeners. If you're listening to this advice and you want to see all of the rankings, you can go to fantasyomatic.com, like we said, just like it sounds. You can even hit them up with lineup questions on Twitter at fantasyomatic, FANTASYOMATIC, and you can check out all the fantasy playoff matchup rankings, quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, all of that on the website. But we have a couple questions in the chat before we let you go, and I know Joe has a comment for you as well. But one of our good friends in here, Mr. Walkie33, he is a Cowboys fan. We don't hold it against him, but he says he wants to know, who do you like better this week, Big Ben, Joe Flacco, or Ryan Fitzpatrick?
Okay, so this week, first of all, we got Big Ben's going against Cleveland, and Cleveland's a really tough matchup this actually all season long, as a matter of fact, mainly because of Joe Hayden. But they're actually ranked 29th easiest, so basically third toughest matchup for fantasy quarterbacks. They've only allowed under actually 10 fantasy points per game in the last 4 games. Joe Flacco, who you just mentioned there, wasn't even able to achieve 5 points. Sam Bradford, not much to be expected there, but got himself 9. Andy Dalton had the most success against them with 15 points. But that's not somebody that I'd want to be riding in the fantasy playoffs, of course. So what I would instead do in that case is go with Buffalo, because Buffalo is going up against San Diego, and San Diego actually is the 7th easiest matchup for fantasy quarterbacks. Let's just put it this way: Blaine Gabbert got 15 fantasy points against them last week, so that should be enough information for you right there. But there has been no quarterback to get less than 15 fantasy points from them in the last 4 games, including a big breakout 25-point game by Jay Cutler. That would be the pick of the 3 that I would go with, is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Even though he's been slumping, you saw a little bit of signs of life from him a couple weeks ago, and I think you can expect the same from him. And beware of Joe Hayden in the secondary there with Cleveland for Big Ben this week. And that goes the same for Mike Wallace, who he's going to be covering all week.
All right, now this is the next question is a little more in-depth, and then we'll get Joe's comment. We'll let you get out of here before we preview tomorrow night's game. And we do have guys coming up with about 10 minutes to go in the program. We'll play our interview with Jordan Schwartzman, talking a little college basketball. Jordan gives us a nice little preview and predicts the winner of the big Ohio State-Kansas matchup this weekend. I also asked Jordan to give us a few freshman names that we can all throw out around the water cooler and seem like a genius come March and April. So I've got some names that you guys can start to drop around your friends, and when they start talking about this guy in March and April, when he's putting up huge numbers, you can say, dude, I was talking to you about that guy before Christmas. So you'll want to hear our interview with Jordan Schwartz coming up in a little bit, as well as Joe and I's preview of the Thursday night game. But our next question comes to us from Wild Bill Rossetti. Is it, Joe, do you remember, is it Rossetti or Rossetti? I always get this poor guy's name wrong.
It's Rossetti.
Rossetti. All right, sorry, Bill. I know I've asked you that like 15 times, but he's got a long list of guys here, so just let me know if you need me to repeat it, Omatic. But he's got McGahee, Wells, Jacobs, Ryan Grant, Julio Jones, Damian Williams. He wants you to pick one running back and one flex. So once again, those names, McGahee, Wells, Jacobs, and Grant. I guess we've got to pick one running back out of those. McGahee, Wells, Jacobs, and Grant. Who's the highest guy that you like the best out of those 4 guys?
Well, first of all, Beanie's going against San Francisco, so no dice, right? Then we got Brandon Jacobs, who, aside from matchups, don't really like him from a volume standpoint, just because Bradshaw, he's resting a little bit this week, but he's going to be back, and they are, going up against Dallas, who actually, started off as they were the number one defense against running backs, but they've kind of dropped a little bit in the rankings in the last month or so. They're actually ranked, still top 10. It's not a bad matchup. If Bradshaw was out, I would actually say that Jacobs would be your guy, but Bradshaw's going to be in, and you really don't know even if Jacobs is even going to touch the ball. So what that leaves you with then is actually McGahee against Chicago this week, which is actually a pretty tough, those are 3 tough picks there. McGahee going against Chicago, who's ranked 25th easiest of all running backs, giving up about 11 combined fantasy points a game to opposing running backs. But Michael Bush put up 15 fantasy points on them. Even Marcel Reese got himself 10 fantasy points. It's not the greatest matchup in the world, but when you look at opportunity and you look at that San Francisco matchup, then McGahee's going to be your guy in the Denver versus Chicago matchup this weekend. And then you had Grant as another guy.
Right, I'm sorry. Yeah, you got Grant. He's got a flex, and you've got any of those running backs or Julio Jones or Damian Williams in the flex spot.
Well, actually, for Damian Williams, I actually love Damian Williams. He's going to be the guy that I'm going to tell you to go with because they're actually going up against New Orleans. New Orleans, obviously known, for the crazy offense that they've got. But over the last month or so, this team is the number 2 easiest matchup for fantasy wide receivers, giving up 30 combined fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Scrubs like Nate Burleson have even got 10 fantasy points against them. Even Harry Douglas threw up almost 14 fantasy points back in Week 10. Damian Williams is also a guy who's getting a lot of looks. Don't have to worry so much about Nate Washington anymore. I do like that matchup a lot. I'd feel really comfortable going into my fantasy playoff matchup with Damian Williams in my flex this week.
All right, and one more quick question from Wild Bill before we let you go. He wants to know Owen Daniels, Brent Selleck, non-PPR league.
No Owen Daniels is what my comment is there for you this week. It should make your other choice very easy. Owen Daniels is going up against Cincinnati, who is the second toughest matchup for fantasy tight ends, yielding only 3 fantasy points to opposing tight ends combined in the last month. There hasn't been a single fantasy tight end that's gotten more than 3 points against them. So basically, by a process of elimination, sit Owen Daniels. His schedule does get a little bit better over the next couple of weeks, but this is the week that you want to sit him down for sure.
All right, so that's pretty much going to do it. We always fun when we get you on the lines, and just such a wealth of information. We could obviously make this like a 2-hour show and just go on and on and on. But I encourage people. I know that you do take the time to. I'm sorry. I'm being an idiot in the chat room. It's been a long week, but I know you take the time to get to everybody and try to do your best with the Twitter comments. So if people have some comments for you, hit him up on Twitter at fantasyomatic, and we'll look to get you back on next week and kind of see how the predictions did, which were some of your hits and misses, and look to get some predictions for Week 15. So until next week, you guys go to fantasyomatic.com. Hit him up on Twitter at fantasyomatic. I'm sure he'll be happy to help, and you guys can check that out for sure. But we appreciate the time, my man, and we look forward to talking to you again next week, bud.
You bet. Jared, Joe, thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it, and I'll look forward to talking to you guys next week.